Have you ever noticed that in almost every group, there's someone who is always there, but somehow never really moving forward? Think about this for a moment. It's a Saturday afternoon. A group of friends are sitting outside a cafe. One person is talking excitedly about a business they're starting. Another friend is sharing plans to move to a new city. Someone else is explaining a project they've been building for months. And then there's one person at the table. They laugh at the jokes. They nod while people talk. They occasionally add a comment here and there. But when the conversation shifts toward their life, something strange happens. So, what have you been up to lately? There's a small pause. Nothing much. Just the usual. The conversation moves on. Later that evening, everyone decides to go somewhere else. People start organizing rides, choosing locations, making plans, and that same person follows along again. Not leading the plans, not resisting them either. Just there. Not unhappy, not particularly excited, just present. You've probably met someone like this. Maybe at work, maybe in your family, maybe in your friend group, maybe online. They're always around, always part of the background of things, always included, but never really steering the direction of their own life. They don't seem to be chasing anything. They're not clearly building something, but they're not exactly lost either. They simply hang around. And that raises a fascinating question most people never stop to think about. Why do some people live this way? Why do some individuals seem comfortable staying on the edges of life, orbiting around other people's plans, goals, and ambitions, instead of creating their own center? And if we're being completely honest, have you ever had moments where you felt like that person too? The psychology behind people who just hang around is far more complex than laziness or lack of ambition. Human behavior is rarely that simple. When psychologists study motivation, they find that people operate under very different psychological drives. Some people are driven by achievement. Some are driven by status. Some are driven by curiosity and exploration. But others are driven by something much quieter, psychological safety. For many individuals who linger rather than lead, the main goal of life isn't dominance, recognition, or even success. It's belonging. Without risk. Think about it. Starting something new means exposure. Speaking up means possible rejection. Leading something means possible failure. But staying nearby? That carries very little cost. You still get the warmth of social connection. You're still part of conversations. You're still included in plans. But you're not stepping into the spotlight where judgment lives. And our brains are deeply wired to avoid that spotlight. Research in social psychology shows that the fear of negative evaluation activates the same brain regions associated with physical pain. In other words, rejection literally hurts. Your brain interprets it as a threat to survival, because for most of human history, being excluded from the tribe could mean death. So what happens if someone grows up learning that visibility is dangerous? Maybe they were criticized every time they tried something new. Maybe they were the quiet kid in school who got laughed at when they spoke. Maybe they once took a big risk that failed publicly. Experiences like that slowly shape the mind. Without even realizing it, a person begins to develop a quiet strategy for navigating the world. Stay present, but not exposed. Stay involved, but not responsible. Stay connected, but not vulnerable. Hanging around becomes a psychological compromise between loneliness and risk. But fear isn't the only explanation. Sometimes the answer lies in identity. Psychologists talk about something called identity diffusion, a stage where someone hasn't yet developed a clear sense of direction or purpose. Studies of young adults often show that many people spend long periods exploring different possibilities before committing to a path. During that time, drifting can look like a lifestyle. You might see someone moving between jobs, hobbies, interests, or social circles without fully committing to any of them. From the outside, it looks like they're just hanging around. Inside their mind, something quieter may be happening. They're observing. listening, trying to understand how the world works and where they fit inside it. Humans are powerful observational learners. Psychologist Albert Bandura demonstrated that we learn many behaviors simply by watching others. Many individuals who seem passive are actually absorbing huge amounts of information about social dynamics. They notice who gets respected. They notice what happens when people fail. They notice how people react to success. But there's a danger hidden inside this habit. Observation can slowly turn into permanent waiting. When someone spends too long studying life instead of stepping into it, watching becomes a substitute for living. Years pass quietly, and the person remains on the sidelines. Another psychological factor, often hiding beneath this behavior, is something called low perceived agency. Agency is the belief that your actions can influence your life. If someone grows up in environments where their choices rarely mattered, maybe strict households, unstable communities, or unpredictable circumstances, they may develop the belief that effort doesn't really change outcomes. And when that belief forms, motivation drops dramatically. Why strive if nothing changes? Why take risks if nothing improves? In those cases, hanging around becomes a logical response to a world that feels uncontrollable. It's not that they don't want more. It's that they don't believe their actions will matter. Social dynamics also play a surprising role. Every group unconsciously organizes itself into roles. Some people become leaders. Some become planners. Some become entertainers who bring humor into the group. Others become challengers who question ideas. And then there are the orbiters. Orbiters stay close to the center, but never try to replace it. They are agreeable, easygoing, and low conflict. In many ways, they stabilize the group by not competing for control. But here's the deeper question almost nobody asks. What happens to someone's inner life when they spend years orbiting other people's gravity instead of creating their own? Because while belonging feels good, humans also have another psychological need: autonomy. According to self-determination theory, human well-being depends on three basic needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Connection alone is not enough. People also need to feel capable, and they need to feel like their life is self-directed. When someone spends too long in passive roles, a quiet dissatisfaction often begins growing under the surface. You may notice subtle signs. They laugh a little less. They hesitate before speaking. They start comparing themselves to others who move forward. And sometimes they ask questions they rarely say out loud. How did everyone else figure their life out? Did I miss my chance to start? Is it too late for me to become something more than the person who just shows up? These thoughts are far more common than people admit. A large workplace study once found that nearly 70% of employees feel disengaged from their work. Many describe themselves as simply going through the motions every day, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack potential, but because somewhere along the way, they slipped into passive participation. Life became something happening around them instead of something they were actively shaping. There's another surprising reason some people end up hanging around. Sometimes it's not because they lack ambition. It's because they have too many possible paths. Modern life has created more choices than any generation in human history. Careers, lifestyles, digital opportunities, communities, identities. Psychologists call this the paradox of choice. When the number of options becomes overwhelming, decision-making can freeze completely. Instead of choosing the wrong path, some people unconsciously choose not to choose at all. They stay close to opportunities without committing to them. Hanging around becomes a kind of waiting room for clarity that never quite arrives. And then there's the world we live in today. In earlier generations, people mostly compared themselves to neighbors or coworkers. Today, we compare ourselves to millions of curated lives online. Every day, someone is launching a business. Someone is traveling the world. Someone is becoming famous. Someone is achieving something extraordinary. When people constantly consume these stories, something strange can happen. Instead of motivating action, it sometimes produces learned spectatorship. People begin to experience life mainly as viewers, scrolling, watching, reacting, observing everyone else's story unfold. Slowly, the line between spectator and participant begins to fade. Some people unconsciously adopt the role of audience members in their own lives. But here's the part most people misunderstand. Many people who hang around are not empty. They're actually full of observations, full of insights, full of ideas they've never shared. People who spend years observing often develop deep understanding of human behavior because they watch everything carefully. Quiet people tend to build rich internal worlds. But without expression, even powerful ideas remain invisible. Which leads to one haunting question. How many potential creators, leaders, innovators, and thinkers have spent their entire lives standing quietly on the edges of their own possibilities? And what separates the people who eventually step forward from those who remain orbiting forever? Sometimes the difference is surprisingly small. A moment of encouragement. A mentor who says, "You should try." A friend who gives them responsibility. Or a life event that forces them to act. Psychologists call these turning points moments when someone's self-perception shifts from observer to participant. And when that shift finally happens, something remarkable can occur. People who spent years quietly watching often become incredibly perceptive leaders because they understand dynamics others never noticed. But that transformation begins with one uncomfortable realization. No one eventually hands you the center of your life. You have to step into it. So here's something worth asking yourself tonight. In the story of your own life, are you building something? Or are you mostly watching? Are you shaping your direction? Or drifting through the gravity of other people's choices? And if you suddenly stopped hanging around the edges, what version of you might finally emerge? If this video made you think, I'd really love to hear your perspective. Have you ever felt like the person who just hangs around? Or have you noticed someone in your life who lives this way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else understand their own story. If you enjoyed this deep dive into human psychology, don't forget to like the video so more people can discover it. And if you want more conversations like this about behavior, mindset, and the hidden patterns of life, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because here, we don't just watch life. We try to understand it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.